Download your favourite apps with Huawei Petal Search. Download now.
Kia ora koutou katoa ngā nui kia koutou, and welcome everyone to Victoria University and the Malaghan Institute, where this morning we are not only reporting in on the vaccine strategy, which we as a government have been working on implementing for several months, but also new investment that we are making as a government to ensure that New Zealand is part of the international work towards a vaccine for Covid-19. In May, we announced our national Covid-19 vaccine strategy, and its mission is to secure access to safe and effective Covid-19 vaccines at the earliest possible time. And today I'm here to talk about the next steps in the strategy. Cabinet has agreed to set aside additional funding from the Covid-19 Response and Recovery Fund. This funding will allow us to participate in global initiatives such as the COVAX facility, in which we've already expressed our interest. It will also enable the Vaccine Strategy Task Force to secure access to promising vaccine candidates by investing early in the process, using tools like advanced purchasing arrangements. This approach of advanced purchasing arrangements is different to how we would usually operate, but these are unprecedented times that require innovative approaches. New Zealanders should rest assured that we are focused on safety, we're focused on effectiveness and access as well as cost. The approach of advanced purchasing arrangements has been adopted by governments around the world. The New Zealand Task Force is already speaking to a number of other countries and vaccine suppliers. The task force is also working closely with their Australian counterparts. And this was the subject of a conversation I had with Scott Morrison at the end of last week. We are both confident of the work that our teams are doing together presently and what we've called an ANZAC approach to vaccines, with a particular focus on working collaboratively to also support our Pacific neighbours in the work around vaccination. We have always drawn from each other's strengths in the area of science and innovation, and the search for a Covid-19 vaccine won't be any different in that regard. This important work builds on investments the government has already made to advance the vaccine strategy locally in regards to research and manufacturing capability. Minister Woods will announce more on that in just a moment. Needless to say, though, there is a long road ahead for us in managing Covid-19. As we have seen, new outbreaks can arise quickly, and we need to remain vigilant. But today my message to New Zealanders would be that there is reason for optimism around the future of vaccinations. The global work has been swift, but also has, of course, kept in mind the need for safety. There is unlikely to be just one vaccination, there will likely be many, and New Zealand is working hard to be a part of not only the research and development around vaccinations, ensuring that it's safe for our own population, but we are also working on making sure we have the capability to manufacture within New Zealand at a large scale as well. This will take time, it is not going to happen tomorrow. But we are well positioned alongside the rest of the world to benefit from a vaccination and vaccinations when they are developed. I'll now hand over to Minister Woods to say a few words.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou and good morning everybody. As the Prime Minister said earlier this year, we allocated initial funding of $37 million to support the development of a vaccine strategy for New Zealand. We had several main objectives out of this vaccine. We wanted to connect ourselves to the world and what was happening globally in all aspects of the vaccine development, distribution and use. We wanted to support our own researchers that they could contribute to the global efforts that were occurring and build relationships to support early access to a vaccine for New Zealand. And as the Prime Minister has talked about, to build our ability to manufacture in case it is needed to secure supply for us here in New Zealand. We also wanted to make sure that we were starting early to optimise regulatory approaches to ensure safety and support that research and enable the manufacturing should the opportunity present. And we wanted to make sure that we fully understood what the purchase arrangements would be needed to secure supply. We established a task force who have been working hard to ensure that this funding that we allocated at the beginning of the year is used appropriately to meet the needs of that strategy. And today I can give you some detail on where this funding has been allocated. Firstly, we joined the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations with a contribution of $15 million. This supports global research efforts and equitable distribution of a safe and effective vaccine if and when one becomes available. We have also invested in progressing local Covid-19 vaccine research in New Zealand to help contribute to the global efforts. And I want to thank the New Zealand scientists that have been doing that work for us. $10 million has been granted to the Vaccine Alliance Aotearoa New Zealand, Ohu Kaparai Huaketio, a team of local and international experts with proven capability in vaccine research and development. Thank you for your efforts. The Maligan Institute is one of those members of the Alliance, so it's fitting that we are here today. Professor Graham LeGros will tell you more about the work program shortly, and it is an excellent example of how we can apply our capabilities and ingenuity to support global vaccine efforts. We're investing in our local manufacturing capacity, as the Prime Minister talked about. BioCell, an Auckland biotechnology company, will receive $3 million to upgrade its existing facilities. This investment will provide the potential opportunity to support global vaccine production and help contribute to global supply if it's an option. Global cooperation is absolutely vital to worldwide recovery. And earlier this year, $7 million was also pledged to the Vaccine Alliance Gavi, which distribute vaccines to developing countries. Although data from early-stage clinical trials look promising, there are no guarantees that a suitable vaccine will be developed. However, our job is to make sure that we have the resources to secure and provide safe and effective vaccine if and when they are available. And we will continue to work hard on progressing the national vaccine strategy to look after New Zealand and our Pacific neighbours. Thank you very much. Professor LeGros.
Thank you, Vic. Kia ora. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Megan. As I said before, we face unprecedented times in this country. The challenges that are being talked about are enormous and are going to take time. With this vaccine strategy, or the need to have a vaccine, it is really a big hill. And I just really want to emphasise this is the time for the scientists like myself and our team and the elsewhere in New Zealand to really stand up and be counted and do the job that they're equipped to do for the country here. So I really thank the government for seeing this investment in New Zealand capability, New Zealand scientific experience, and New Zealand's global interactions. I just want to make this emphasis. We can't do this completely by ourselves. This is about having the people who can interact with the global community to solve this problem, because it's a big problem for ourselves, the Pacific, and our Australian partners. So we're doing it all together there. I'd like to just say, what is the Vaccine Alliance Aotearoa New Zealand? Ohu Kapari Hukateo. The group of people who make the virus go away is how it translates. And I hope we can do that, because it's really fantastic if we could. What we actually are set up to do is to screen all the different vaccine candidates that are out there internationally, ones that are being developed nationally, screen them, check out how they work preclinically or clinically, and can they be suitable for New Zealand? And that's a very important role. And how can we do that? We actually have brought together across New Zealand scientists, clinicians, manufacturers, people involved in the biotechnology industry, with the support of this $10 million to really make a group of people who can really give benefit to what is the best type of vaccine, what is the safest vaccine, and how can we get it here as soon as possible. This is the best way we have of interacting with our global community and with our national community. And I'd like to finish with, just before we go to questions, and just say, look, It's a real challenge. We know it's a real challenge. You know it's a real challenge. And I'm really glad to have the support here of the government. We're going to have to do this together. All I can guarantee you is the scientists of VANS, the Vaccine Alliance out here in New Zealand, will do their absolute best to see if we can deliver what is required for this country. So thank you very much, and let's have some questions, and I'll throw it over to you guys and the ministers.
So we'll just stay vaguely here in the front and happy to take questions. Professor, and I'll throw to whoever's first to the Professor. We'll do a little merry dance.
What's your best estimate on how long it will take to?
I don't want to depress anyone, but it is going to take time. I wanted to put in my speech there, we have to be patient. We have to work together. I think the Prime Minister has given some very strong messages over the past few months. It's going to take, my guess is 2 years. But my scientific colleague, James Usher, who's the scientific director of the Vaccine Alliance, he may actually have something else to say there. James?
Thanks, Graham. So we're seeing unprecedented progress from the scientific community. We're 8 months into a pandemic and we already have multiple vaccine candidates in phase 3 trials. So I think that we can be very proud of what the scientific community has achieved globally to date. We would hope that there may be some results from some of those phase 3 trials in the first part of next year at the earliest. But there is then the big challenge after that. If a vaccine is shown to be efficacious and safe in those trials, we then need to scale up manufacturing globally and vaccine distribution. So just getting a vaccine successfully through trials is only the first step. There's still many other challenges before we can get a vaccine into New Zealanders' arms.
So what's your best guess then on a timeline? What's your best guess scenario?
Oh, look, I think it's unprecedented. I don't think we can know when that might be, but I think it's likely to be in the order of, as Graham has said, probably in a couple of years or potentially longer. We're not necessarily going to get all the vaccine that we need in one go. That is because of that massive global demand and scale up the manufacture. So it may be that some vaccine comes in initially for those at the most risk or for frontline healthcare workers or those at the borders. That's something that needs to be worked out. But it's going to take time.
I might get ministers just to speak to the investment in manufacture within New Zealand, because this is one of the things that we're trying to get ahead on.
So one of the things that we identified very early when putting together the vaccine strategy, that unless we had a proactive approach to this, that New Zealand potentially using traditional purchase agreement could end up quite at the back of the queue globally. So one of the pieces of work that we worked hard to ensure was work with the capability we had to scale up manufacturing so that we may, either for a New Zealand developed vaccine or for a licensed arrangement with an internationally developed vaccine, that we'd have the ability to manufacture that in New Zealand. What became really clear to us through those very early discussions that we couldn't just manufacture enough for the team of 5 million if we were going to secure international licensing agreements to manufacture. We needed to be able to manufacture at internationally competitive commercial volumes. So that is, depending on the vaccine, BioCell will be able to manufacture up to 100 million doses. So we're looking at large-scale manufacture because otherwise we simply would be left out. So this is why part of the prongs of our strategy has been investing in our manufacturing capability.
I'd like to ask you a follow-up on that, in terms of the Minister saying you needed to be proactive so that you weren't at the back of the queue.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of dollars invested. Where does that put us in the queue now?
Yeah. And look, the reason we've done that is because, of course, assessments will be made around those countries with high needs. And relative to others, New Zealand has performed incredibly well in protecting its population from Covid-19. We don't want that to be a reason where we're not able to access vaccination in a timely way once it's safely developed. So this strategy is all about making sure that we're in amongst those negotiations as well with those who are developing vaccination, and there are multiple vaccinations currently in development, to make sure that we are positioning ourselves to not only support our population, but actually the population around us, of the Pacific as well, So that's what that approach has been all about, not just here in New Zealand, but alongside Australia, securing our position amongst others. The hundreds of millions we've put into this strategy, I think means that we can be optimistic around where New Zealand will be positioned relative to others.
In lay terms, can you explain the challenges with developing a vaccine for this virus that's leading obviously to the international scientific activity and the time that it's going to take?
The brutal truth is that we don't know a lot about this virus and how to make an effective vaccine against it. It's a relatively simple virus, but we actually have to learn in a time frame which is just really not, is unprecedented. I hate to use that word. And I think it's possible. I think a number of the different options we're seeing from America, China, Asia, they're very exciting, but all unproven. Part of the problem is we're trying to roll out something so fast. We've gone for technologies that are really unproven, unlicensed, but they give us a speed of reaction to just get the countries working again. So we're living in a situation where we don't know enough yet, and we're just waiting for every new week's worth of data and information about how the virus works, what's effective, and what's dangerous about a vaccine against the virus. James, you might want to add something to that.
I mean, we haven't previously had a vaccine against coronavirus come through to clinic. There has been vaccine development work in the past with the original SARS coronavirus back in the early 2000s, which was halted because the virus was controlled through public health measures. And there is ongoing vaccine work around Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome virus in the Middle East. But at the moment, I mean, what we see from preclinical work, it appears that vaccines can provide protection against SARS coronavirus too, and I think they look promising, but we just need to wait for those phase 3 efficacy trials.
What's the risk that a vaccine is developed and then it mutates or there's another strain and it becomes redundant? Is that all, how do you deal with that?
Look, at the moment, the virus has shown very little mutation. It has had a susceptible population to spread in. It is entirely possible that there may be a change in the virus with time. However, this, unlike some other viruses such as influenza, this virus has genetic mechanisms that do reduce the amount of mutation. We will just need to wait and see whether vaccines require updating. At the moment, there's no evidence of mutations that show escape from the current vaccines.
Just make a plea too. We always talk about the vaccine, and we hear about in the media, the vaccines in America and stuff. They're all actually, there's a lot of vaccines. We'd actually want to have, New Zealand's got a privilege. We can actually get a vaccine which can give long-term immunity. We actually have a situation where we don't want to rush in and get necessarily the first vaccine. We actually want to get the right vaccine for New Zealand's situation for our people. And we've actually got the time, and that's part of the research. And the manufacturing is actually tuning and getting it nuanced so we actually get the right one for New Zealand. And that's a big deal, and will save us a lot of money too.
Prime Minister, can we keep living this way for the next 2 years until we get a vaccine?
I think it's fair to say that there are everyone that's asked will give a different range and a different opinion around the timelines that we're working to. Obviously, you've heard the view here from Maligan Institute. If you ask others, and I've heard others say that they think that it could be sometime next year. There are different views. What we do know is that it is going to take some time. It's not going to be in the next few months. That's why, of course, we do need to make sure we have a public health approach that protects our health and well-being, because in the interim, that large-scale protection that comes from vaccine development is going to take some time.
But that public health approach is, I guess, quite uncomfortable for a lot of people who live in this way. Is that strategy going to remain in place until we get a vaccine?
Look, I think what we've seen in New Zealand is that it is possible to have rules in place and a plan in place that actually can give you a lot of freedom. But that doesn't mean that from time to time we won't have to change our response. We're going through that at the moment. But we do have the ability to get back to where we were. That is part of our ongoing plan, to live with as few restrictions as possible, but be ready to scale up and stamp it out as it arises. I think the thing that's important for us in New Zealand to remember is actually we had a quite prolonged period of freedom. Many countries have not. They've had consistent restrictions all the way through because they haven't taken a stamp it out approach, which I think just shows the value of that.
Can you elaborate on
And then Henry.
potentially being the victim of our own success? Have you had advice that our success in eliminating has pushed us back in with you?
Oh no, not that's been some of the in the briefings that we've received. That's been something we've been prepared for. So it's not necessarily something that we've had early signal around, but you can understand why there is high priority placed on those places which may not have the means, may not have the access, and that is completely understandable. We have a strong health system. We've been able to protect our population very, very well, particularly when you look at our death rate. We didn't want that to stand in the way of us being able to be part of the global efforts around vaccination, and also that includes manufacturing, if we have the right kind of vaccine, to be able to manufacture within New Zealand as well. I'll come to Henry. And then...
Where exactly these hundreds of millions of dollars are coming from, given we're not part of the $14 billion? Is it underspent for other projects?
I'd actually have to check the appropriation, but it was allocated some time ago by Cabinet.
On the sensitivity, is there no way you can at least put like a top level figure on? I mean, Pharmac obviously the money is sensitive there as well, but we still know how much money Pharmac spends in total. Is there actually no?
Yeah, I'll let Minister Woods. This has been in a discussion. Of course, what we're demonstrating here is a sizable fund, but of course there's a relatively contained group that we are negotiating with, and so that's why we just want to maintain our position there. But it is in the order of hundreds of millions. Yeah.
You mentioned that you were working with or in conversations with Justin Trudeau and Angela Merkel. Are we also in discussions with the US and China?
Yeah, so I have had conversations really around vaccination, around participation in Gavi and the COVAX facility. That's where there's been quite a bit of international collaboration and discussion. I've had those conversations with the likes of Chancellor Merkel, Prime Minister Trudeau. I have had a conversation with a member of the administration in America, and so it is fair to say that we have had quite wide-ranging discussions. In part, it's just making sure we keep that up. Different governments are sometimes taking different approaches. New Zealand has been a very strong advocate for equitable access, and that's not just on behalf of ourselves and our region. Our view is that in all of the collaborative work that's been done to find a vaccination, no country should be disadvantaged because of their relative wealth or position of power. This needs to be equitable access.
What about China though? Have you tried to have conversations with China?
I haven't had direct conversations. I can't speak on behalf of the scientific community though, and there is a lot of collaboration going on.
On equitable access.
Yep. Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Go ahead.
On equitable access, what does that look like? What do you hope that looks like for Māori here in New Zealand?
Of course, our view is that we have to make sure that we are able to support all of our country and all of our people, but also making sure that our response is specific to New Zealand and our population base. And so the conversation that we've just been having with our scientists is making sure that if we do see vaccinations produced offshore through global research and collaborative research, that we're making sure that it is going to work for our population. And so that's a key part of what our Vaccination Alliance here in New Zealand are working on.
Prime Minister, on this,
I'll just come here.
The global pharmaceutical ecosystem is not known for having the most ethical corporate actors. So what's kind of been your experience in negotiating with these people?
Minister Woods, and you're actually from MB, is much closer to that. Would you mind if I hand it over to someone who has that experience?
He's been sitting at the table.
Yeah, we certainly haven't had that experience at all, and I think all of their incentives are to do absolutely the right things, in terms of not just ethics but regulatory approvals process, and they do this year on year on year. So everybody wants an absolutely safe vaccine, and yes, in a timely fashion, but everyone's investing at an unprecedented level to get to that point as well.
Are you assured that there won't be price fixing?
Yeah, look, so there are quite a lot of pharmaceutical companies that are doing this at the moment, so you actually do have a market, you have an active market going on, and in some cases I think that probably is in contrast with some other cases where you don't have a global pandemic, and so there may only be one company developing that vaccine. So at this point in time, I think we're seeing a lot of companies in that race.
Prime Minister, if we do develop the capability to manufacture hundreds of millions
Depending on the
of
nature of the vaccine.
would we be selling those on the open market, or would we be distributing them to say the Pacific to kind of help out?
I mean, first and foremost for us, we do have a focus on the Pacific. We do want to make sure, of course, that we're catering for our population and also our neighbours. You know, supporting and taking a regional approach will be a key part of what we're working on. But Minister Woods can give you a bit more detail.
All I was going to say is it would be part potentially of a licensing agreement, a global licensing agreement, so that we would need to manufacture under a licensing agreement, so there'd be arrangements that would be put in place commercially there.
Sorry, just on a quickly on a different topic, Brent and Tarek have been sentenced today. Do you have a message for the Muslim community?
I will be a little bit careful. I've been told I shouldn't say anything really until after the sentencing. And so my reflections would simply be on those who have shown such strength in sharing their statements over the last few days. I'm sure every New Zealander who's read them has been devastated to see them having to relive the trauma of that day and hear the ongoing trauma that it's created for all of them.
Do you think that will give the country some sense of closure?
Yeah, again, I'm mindful that I'm meant to not speak really until after the sentencing. I don't think anything removes what happened that day. I actually think the only thing that really gives comfort is the ongoing reaction and response of all New Zealanders. And so I hope that they continue to show all of the empathy and solace that our Muslim community deserve.
What was the latest advice that you've received and your own thinking in terms of reporting them back to Australia?
Yeah, do you mind? That I will specifically leave until after sentencing, if I may. And yes, I have received some advice on that, so happy to speak to that in a bit more detail on another occasion. So you had a question for the Professor?
Yeah. This sort of idea that you've mentioned that there might be early vaccines that would have shorter term immunity or would require booster shots versus, I guess, for New Zealand, you'd be looking for a later vaccine or a possible later vaccine that does provide that long-term immunity. Is that correct? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, as James and I have said before, we're just learning how to make a protective immune response against this virus, which is safe. Because you can make vaccines, but they actually may, in 1 in 1,000 people, cause dramatic reactions. And so we actually have to go through that process there. So some of these vaccines are kind of the most minimal thing you need to do to stimulate the immune response to make some kind of protective immunity, say for disease. It doesn't even stop infection. But the later vaccines, which we're working on right now, really stimulate the immune response like bloody hell. And it really drive a long-term immune response that we can be sure give a person lifelong immunity. So we're trying to...
Technical term.
Yeah, thank you. So that should be enough.
And when you said 2 years, did you mean 2 years from now-ish or 2 years from the start of the pandemic? In your sort of...
I want to go defer. I think the Prime Minister was so good, and look at the way she swayed it around there. It's not fair, really, to raise falsehood. All I'm trying to say, we must be patient. We must believe in what we're trying to do here. We must believe in the financial instruments which have been put in place to try and really work with the world and work with ourselves to give us it'll be as fast as possible. It'd be wrong for me just to say it's going to be this time because then you'll come back. It depends on the vaccine. It depends on the way the population is feeling, and it depends upon all the issues that the Prime Minister has to deal with and Megan have to deal with the economy, etc., etc. That's their choice. We can make a vaccine tomorrow if you like, but it all depends how safe it is and how soon you want it.
Just on that, do you think that the likes of the US and others that you mentioned in terms of those hard and fast vaccines that we have seen are raising false hope? And do you think
I think, well, we all know here in this room, it's politically driven, and we have to be very careful, and we are saying that we don't need to be that way. We need to ensure that safety comes first, because if you do something wrong and hurt someone, it destroys the whole confidence of the population in vaccination as a medical therapy in dealing with this virus, and we don't want to do that. And so I think you'll see an international resistance to rushing in, and you see it already in the States.
Do you think the political nature of the way the States is dealing with it is dangerous?
I don't want to get into that sort of stuff. We all have those opinions. You make that choice yourself. It also puts pressure on to try and actually maybe cut the right corners. You know, I'm not going to be drawn on that kind of thing. We'll see what happens in the end of the wash.
What's your gauge on the New Zealand
I think sorry, we'll take Derek. Last question,
Yeah,
if you don't
because
mind.
we've got to do some science. Do you want to stop us taking the vaccine?
Can you give us an update on the New Zealand efforts in the vaccine?
There's a number of local
Where they
candidates.
stand?
Yeah, there's a number of local. The question is update on the New Zealand candidates. There's some local New Zealand candidates currently in preparation, getting tuned up, which we, as the vaccine platform, will be able to independently evaluate for its preclinical and clinical and potential for manufacturing, and we're trying to pick the best one that can slip into that system.
Okay, all right, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
And now featuring Petal Search, your gateway to 1 million apps.